Hello, Dr. Arnold. Hello, dear friends. My name is Jainab. I'm going to present my microhistory book review here. The book that I have reviewed is titled A Group of Their Own, College Writing Courses and American Women Writers from 1880 to 1940. This book is written by Katherine H. Adams. It was published in 2001 by State University of New York. It was a project sponsored by Grants and Leaves Committee of Loyola University during a sabbatical semester. So the book is divided into 6 chapters, which I'm going to review one by one. But before that, let me talk about the overview of the book. It begins with the reference of Simone de Beauvoir and Virginia Woolf's work that present women as the other. But then Katherine shows statistics that shows that American universities or American education had more women students and writers at that time than in Europe. Before 1900, it was a new discipline for women in America. But after 1900, more families had a wider choice of public and private institutions and became more interested in formal education for women. Also, we see that the role of English departments across the country played a big role in the 19th century by offering more courses on fiction and nonfiction. And then we see that there were several groups of women who emerged in the academia and then continued to work in collaboration in their professional lives as well. Now, the intervention in the history of writing and rhetoric and writing instruction is definitely there. The book shows the emergence of collaborative women writers group from academia to new kind of professional group. The book also discusses the new ideas which continue to take part in developing rhetorical theory and writing instruction. We also see how this book discusses the writing instruction which shaped the women into good writers or better writers and also shows their struggles. So I think this book is an amazing work. Now let us talk about the chapters. In chapter 1, before 1880, Katherine is showing that women writers started writing by just giving excuses only. The first excuse was that they had financial necessity, so they started writing out of financial necessity during the colonial period and early 19th century. But after that, they started writing more, and critics also praised women's writing for moral and artistic value. And by the end of this time period, but before 1880, we see that American colleges and universities began to provide professional training and instructional education to women so that they become better writers. So in the first chapter, the writer has referred to these women. I have collected the pictures from Google and I have just attached them here. In the second chapter, the college literature and writing class, we see that how college literature and writing classes prepared the students, the women students, to be writers. There were higher education for women, but at that time they prepared the women, the institutions, they prepared the women to become good wives and mothers. So they offered courses on religious studies, domestic work, and classical education. Then women started doing their major in English department, but then the human subjects became ladylike subjects, so it was stigmatized because there were more women students than male students. We also see the writing curriculum is also analyzed here by the author. The author, Katherine, uses different data and collected syllabi from different universities and showcased these sort of results that the women started writing poetry, prose. They also started writing journalistic writing because there was a change in writing instruction. It was almost workshop based. Verse making classes were provided to them. And then the women started becoming comfortable with the public spheres and professional spheres, so they started taking writing as a professional career. Then in the third chapter, we see the relationship between teacher and student is provided here. First of all, the teachers were of both kinds. They used to encourage the students to become better writers. They also intimidated the students by giving harsh evaluation. So the students, because they had lack of independence, they had fear of judgment, harsh comments, teachers' appropriation. But at the same time, when they started forming their group, the collaborative work helped them subside the fear because they were then working as a group, so the sisterhood was also there. And then we see that they started moving, the group started moving from the classes to clubs and publications. So women started emerging as groups and that also helped them to emerge as an individual. In the fourth chapter, we see that when women were emerging, they were gaining their voices to talk about their choices. So they could choose to be writers, they could choose to be family person, so the choice was theirs. But at the same time, Katherine is showing how they had to deal with the day-to-day struggles of writing. So she analyzed textual evidence written by other women writers during the 19th and early 20th century, who talked about family values, economic necessities, editorial interference, and isolation as a women writer in the society as the struggle that they had to face. In the fifth chapter, we see how the groups continued to emerge. They had supports from other women, but they also faced problems in the male-centered groups, and they also started claiming their own space in the academia and outside of the academia. So they started moving from their classes to the professional works. They also joined summer workshops, which was directed by men, but there were involvement of women, and they started writing poetry and fiction. And we also see that the male tradition of rhetoric, the male tradition shaped society, cultural values, and the policies. So women also started taking part in those rhetorics, and they started voicing their choices. And then in the last chapter, we see that the women writers were redefined, because before the emergence of women writers, the writer is talking about journalism sector, which divided the good women and bad women. So the good writers, the good girls, they used to write in women's pages, and the bad girls used to write in other pages. But gradually the women started claiming their space, and they restructured the design of the American newspaper, so women could write in all the sections after that. And we also see that there were influential women novelists and journalists regardless of the race. So there were many African American journalists who were very powerful, and they became very powerful and through their collaborative writing. Now let us talk about the methods of inquiry. I found plethora of textual evidence here. So the writer Katherine, she textually analyzed the evidence that she found in the archives. There were a series of statistics. Also, she collected data and textual evidence from different universities across the country. Since it was a project sponsored by the grant committee, I think she got the fund to do this sort of big research. Let us talk about the gaps now. This is a historical book, also an archival book. And the audience is, I think, the scholars and researchers of rhetoric and writing studies. The purpose of this book, since it was a project, I think the purpose is to contribute to the knowledge system, to the archival knowledge system. It was educational and persuasive as well. Persuasive because the writer used some sort of rhetorical choices, which actually helped the writing, help the book to be credible enough for the readers. And the situation is 19th century and 20th century, but I think it is still relevant, and that is why the book matters to us. The book also matters because it talks about the women's struggle and the women's struggle in American society. We also can learn from the writing style of an archival research. To me, the most important thing for which the book matters is to figure out the rhetorical choices of a female researcher writing about women writers and scholars. So since women writers or women researchers also have to bear the stigma of being biased when they write about other women, so I think finding out the rhetorical choices of Katherine is a big thing. I mean, we can also learn from how she writes about other women by providing evidence, facts, and statistics. So this is why this book matters. It also matters to confess that the change is really, really slow, because we can also contextualize some of the evidence, some of the examples in our society. I would like to recommend this book because this book is an amazing work. It is a fine document of what we call a creature feminine, which Helen Sixers also said. This book shows a long history of women's oppression beyond Virginia Woolf and Simone de Beauvoir. So it talks about American struggle. And I think this book has a strong potential to be secondary source for many other research papers that will focus on 19th century, 20th century women's writing or women's struggle. That's it. Thank